Exchange Limited, and joining me via Zoom is an investment banker and stockbroker, a friend of the house, of course, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. It's good to have you join us on Business Nigeria. Yeah, I see that the market's closing positive today at 0.59%. What do you think is responsible? Is it connected to the 90-day pause we've seen that's the 90-day pause of the Donald Trump tariff plan? All right, just before we take Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, because we seem to be having some technical challenges, well, let's give you some stories now. Annual urban consumer price inflation accelerated to 13.6% in March from 12% in February, higher than analysts had expected. The data shows that on a month-on-month basis, prices were 1.6% higher in March than in February. Food and beverage prices climbed 3.5% in the same period. According to analysts, annual urban inflation had plunged to 12.8% in February from 24% in January, largely due to a statistical base effect, as exceptionally fast price increases of the past 2 years were no longer reflected in the statistics. While global shares surged and bond sell-off stabilized today after U.S. President Donald Trump said it would temporarily lower the duties he had imposed on dozens of countries. Following days-long market rout that erased trillions of dollars from global stocks and jolted U.S. Treasury bonds and the dollar, President Trump announced a 90-day pause on many of his new reciprocal tariffs in a shock reversal. Trump's reversal pushed equities higher across the globe, starting with a 9.5% rally in the S&P 500. European shares are also recovering today. The Band Continental Stock 600 is up 5.3%, on track for its biggest one-day gain since March 2020. Indexes in London, Paris and Frankfurt are up between 4.1% and 5.6%. In Asia, Japan's Nikkei advanced more than 8%, while on a broader gauge of Asia-Pacific shares, excluding Japan, rose 4.4%. But Wall Street futures took a breather after the towering rally as investors struggled to come to terms with the U.S. administration's economic policies. Nasdaq futures fell 2% and S&P 500 futures were off 1.7%. President Donald Trump has announced a 3-month pause on all the reciprocal tariffs rate to 10% that went into effect at midnight, with the exception of China. The U.S. stock market surged immediately after the announcement. At the same time, the president said he was increasing the tariff rate on imported goods from China to 125%.
With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way. And I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way. I have great respect for China. But they can't do this. We're going to have one shot at this, and no other president's going to do this, what I'm doing.
Well, let's go back to reviewing trading activities at the Nigerian Exchange Limited. And of course, joining me via Zoom is an investment banker and stockbroker, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. It's good to have you join us. We see that the market is closing positive at 0.59%. Is it connected or unconnected with the 90-day pause of the Trump tariff?
Well, Nigeria, the market has become a global market, like we said all over. And again, when the market went down, it was attributed to that Trump tariff. So, and global markets are recovering. So the Nigerian market should not be an exception to that. I think we are seeing gradual recovering, especially from the banking stock, especially the Fuga Bank, exception of Access Bank. All other, I think we'll see gradual recovery because, again, the market itself wasn't bad at all. I mean, when you look at the economy, when you look at the results, when you look at what these companies are paying, there was no need for them going the way they were going. But again, it's all about perception, international trade, and international diplomacy. our market globally were tumbling. And so the Nigerian market wouldn't have been an exception from that.
Taking a look at some of the gainers we had today, what would you say is responsible for the number of volumes of trade we had today?
Well, for trading, investors are seeing good entry points, especially in stocks that are paying dividend. That means giving them good dividend yield. If you look at GTCO, it's paying about 7 naira, 3 kobo, and close today at about 65 naira. So I mean 66 naira. So investors are seeing about 10% dividend yield, and we are not putting into capital appreciation. The same thing with Zenith Bank, close at 47 naira. So investors are just looking at the dividend yield, and again, in anticipation of the first quarter result, which a lot of investors think is going to be very good, especially when you look at the histories of some of these banks, what their earning per share has been, and their current expansion after the recapitalization. A lot of investors are optimistic about it, and so they are taking position, especially in the financial stocks.
Investment banker and stockbroker, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, thank you so much for helping us understand what we went down at the Nigerian Exchange Limited.
Thank you.
All right, let's take some of our stories now before we wrap up. Crude oil prices retreated nearly 3% today as fears of the deepening U.S.-China trade war and possible recession heightened, even as President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on sweeping tariffs against many countries. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell to $60.81 per barrel with a downward review of 2.47%. Brent crude futures sell at $63.87 per barrel with a price decline of 2.46%. Bun Light sell at $78.62 per barrel with a downward margin of 2.84%. For the OPEC basket, dealers offer $66.54 per barrel, but with an uptick of 0.44%. Well, that's all we can take on Business Nigeria today. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. The World Now starts in a moment. To stay with us.